Adam Cutler, distinguished designer, one of the first three at IBM, is here to share more about their journey and what are the pillars for their big design transformation, which again is making 380,000 people think differently and not just deliver new products and services in a different way.
From the very beginning, we realized that there are three elements that we need to have a sustainable culture of design at IBM. And as Mariano was saying, 380,000 people, we're the size roughly of Luxembourg. So to get an idea across and make it stick, there's somewhat of a willpower situation that you have to take into account. And when I was working with Steelcase at one point, I remember one of the folks that I was working with had drawn up on the board that culture is really behavior over time. And that stuck with me, that I think a lot of times, especially in the enterprise, people want to say that culture is something that it's an initiative. It's something that you do, you sort of add water and poof, up comes a culture, but it's something that you actually have to stick with over the course of time. So it would help if I turned on my remote. It's people, places, and practices. This is the three elements of our culture that we hammer on every day without fail. And the first, people, I'm going to go through this really quickly. We're in the process of hiring 1,500 designers. So we've identified over 10,000. We've reviewed 5,300 plus. 1 out of every 40 portfolios is selected. This is part of every designer's give back. From the very first 60 designers that we brought into the program back in 2013, July 2013, everybody has to give back to reviewing portfolios to make sure that we are constantly sticking to what we want to have come through our culture as the people and the chemistry make up. We've done 1,700 phone screens, 830 fly downs where we bring the people who make the final cut for a 3-day interview process down to Austin. And then in the time that we've been doing this, we've hired 750, bringing our total designers across the company to 1,100 on our way to 1,500 by the end of 2018. We also have our first corporate approved design career ladder, and that starts with entry level down here at Associate Designer and ends with IBM Fellow. As Mariano was saying, myself and two others are we're the first 3 distinguished designers at the company, and this is something where we have finally gotten an equal seat at the table. There are distinguished engineers, and then there are IBM Fellows. For us to be able to have a seat at the table where corporate decision-making and corporate policy is being made around how we approach everything, whether it is our own internal HR processes, to the way that we go to market, to the way that we design our products, designers are in the mix at every step of the way. Next are places, and so I designed the first 2 floors of the Austin studio, and what we really are doing with the studio platform now is a common place for everybody to go and work as whole teams with everything that they need in one place. The most important thing that I saw was that people need the freedom and the flexibility to work the way that they want to work. When we were in our first temporary space, there was this really heavy wood boardroom furniture, and one of the designers said, "Do you have a toolbox?" And I said, "Sure," and without thinking about it, handed a toolkit over to a 23-year-old and came back, and they had undone all of the furniture in the room and rearranged the entire room based on how they were working. And then the team next to them did that, and the team next to them did that, but then it didn't stop there. They did it again 2 days later, and we were just in the demolition process of the first floor of our studio, and I went back to the architects and said, "There's a new design conceit. Everything has to be on wheels, and if it's not on wheels, 2 people, 5 feet tall, 90 pounds, 2 people have to be able to move anything in the studio." So if you ever visit us in Austin, it's a little bit like visiting the ocean. The shore looks the way that it does that day, come back 3 weeks later, and it looks totally different. And really, our designers look at this as their home. Each group makes their own space the way that they need. In fact, when you can see them in the background, we actually, Phil and I, on 2 separate trips, were at the D school, and we both fell in love with the hanging whiteboards. And so we said, where, how? And they said, well, it was sort of a project that Steelcase and IDEO and us had worked on together, and it never really went anywhere. And the next thing you know, we're working with Steelcase, and in our studio in Austin, we have the first of its kind, where it was the first commercialized version of this wonderful hanging whiteboard system, where we can rapidly construct and deconstruct space in a matter of moments, and it's the entire 25,000 square foot floor plate. So we can make this into whatever we want it to be, and the designers make use of this every single day. But as we were working, and I sort of have to tell the joke a little bit out of order, when we were doing our first instances of design boot camp, what we kept hearing was, first, my manager will never buy this, they won't believe in this. And we love using the sticky notes, but how do we do this because we're in 4 different time zones in 6 different countries? And it was around this time that somebody from my team had reached out to somebody on Mariano's team, but at the same time, Tim had introduced Mariano and Phil, and we took one look at what Mural was doing, and we realized that this was something that was going to allow us to do extensive sticky note work across boundaries. So Michael Ackerbauer is here in the front row, and one of the things that he works on is what started life as on his side was our DevOps tool chain, and on my side it was this concept of the virtual studio, and it was to be able to deliver what we were doing in the spaces locally and do this at a digitally distributed level. So we have what we call Whitewater today, which is basically the tool chain and the virtual studio mixed together. And it includes things like GitHub and Slack, but Mural as well, and our own Bluemix platform. And as Mariana was saying earlier, this, I think at the beginning, you guys must have been cursing our names every 15 minutes because we would get on, like you could see the time zones come on where like 5,000 people would log on to Mural and we'd bring it to its knees and then it would come slowly back up, and it was like this moment of we knew that we were onto something where if we were causing service outages, like we weren't pushing people to use this. People were like, when is it coming back online? Our work is in here. We need this right now. And so it's really been this wonderful love affair. And you can see, like I took this snapshot yesterday where there's 617 or so rooms just within this one instance. And then who knows how many of the private rooms there are, and inside who knows how many murals are in here. There's no way for us to keep track of it. But this is something that is really critical to the way that we practice design thinking across the entire company. Not only that, we use it for onboarding, we use it for our product teams, we use it in our education. It has taken on a life of its own. This is really critical, and because we have our own custom templates in the background, it allows us to practice our flavor of IBM design thinking with our own stuff. We don't have to remake this over and over again, so part of it has the education baked into it. And then there's the practices, which is what I am directly responsible for. So I am the director of design practices for IBM. So this includes IBM design thinking. We've been working on a number of different taglines, but I think we're settling on smarter teams, better ideas, and happier users. We went through a whole bunch of corporate stuff, tried to word it just so. There's something that's really nice about the human end of this, and Diego was talking about Charles and Ray Eames. I try to channel them every day because they were always trying to connect humanity to technology and vice versa. So real quick, I'm going to go through these. The principles guide us, and that's focus on user outcomes. How many people in the room are actual designers? So a little less than half. We actually have to tell this to people. It is not common sense. It is something that we need to explain to people all the time. The second is multidisciplinary teams, and we're actually toying around with changing the term for this into diverse teams. But the idea here is that designers can't solve these problems by themselves, but neither can engineers. You need to have diversity of thought, diversity of ideas, diversity of approaches in order to be successful. And then the last is restless reinvention, because oftentimes without taking a design thinking approach, what we find is you sit in a conference room or on a conference call, and the two alphas argue about whose idea is the most important, while 29 people have their time wasted, and there's no real decisions made. And so what we found is if you're willing to be wrong early, and you're willing to constantly go back and reiterate on your, revise your understanding as you go forward, it changes the way that you actually approach solving the problem. So that's where the loop comes in. If you take these things and sort of mush them together, the loop drives us, and this is sort of a combination of a number of different ideas that were out there but never put together in one place. And what we really wanted to do was, by using the lemniscate, we wanted to tell people that this wasn't something that you started and then you finished. It was a continual process. And by going through this continual process of observation, reflection, and making, that we were hitting sort of all of the right buttons for all the different constituents at IBM. And the important thing is that what we found was designers are really thrilled to sort of hang out in the observe area, and they'll tell you that they need to talk to just 5 more users, and they'll do that ad infinitum. And engineers they'll start putting code together without knowing what it is that they're building or who they're building it for. And pretty much everybody wasn't doing any reflecting at all. And that by introducing this moment of reflection, slowing down just enough to say, what did we learn, what did we see, what did we make, and how did that work? It's starting to generate a number of conversations that just weren't happening before, and it's cutting across most of our, the different schools of thought or the disciplines that we have. This has been really helpful for a lot of people to get past their prejudices about what their role is in the company. And then as we talked with Tim, we talked with David Kelly and a number of others, we found that everybody was telling us that design thinking worked great when you were in the D-School studios or if you had a small team, but if you were going to scale this for 380,000 people, it really didn't scale out that way. And so this is where we realized that the biggest issue that people have is around alignment. If you don't have alignment, it doesn't matter what you do. If everybody's going off in a different direction, you're not going to get the results that you want. So if you have everybody observing, reflecting, and making, and again, this doesn't happen sort of nice and neat. It's a messy process where people are going through it backwards and forwards and starting wherever they will. Hills are statements of intent where we're making sure that this is what the user gets at the end, regardless of how you build it or what goes sideways. Playbacks are the moment where we actually truly reflect as a team. We have senior stakeholders, SVPs, down to the entry-level practitioners, all in the same meeting, going over high frame rate, user-centered stories that say, this is what we're working on right now, and are we still heading in the same direction? And then to this gentleman's point over here, where I think if you work for the enterprise, it is very difficult to get at your customers, your end users. So we came up with a program for sponsor users, and this is where we have actual forms that are, vetted by our legal teams, and we pick between 3 and 5 sponsor user clients that they are either potential users or actual users of the product or the service that we're putting together. And we explained to them that over the course of a release, they'll be working with us between 10 and 50 hours. Sometimes they come to us, sometimes we go to them, and sometimes we work virtually. But this ensures that they're co-designing with us so that we're not going off and making sure that we're aligned on what they need to be successful and not what we're saying they need to be successful. So the principles frame the way that we see problems. The loop enables us to find the right problem to solve for the right people, and the keys keep us aligned on our clear intent and purpose and keep everybody honest with one another. I wish I could tell you that this is humming along and everybody's doing it perfectly, and it's not. But we are getting better. We've trained over 10,000 people in the company, which sounds like a lot until you do the math, and then that works out to be about 29 years for us to train everybody. So we're constantly looking at different ways to be able to scale what it is that we do. I'm going to move really fast through here. We also came up with the IBM design language. My team is responsible for this. We have over 3,000 products in IBM, so there isn't a one-size-fits-all in terms of we can't have a HIG. We have to have something that allows people to use parts of speech, vocabulary, et cetera, to be able to do what they need to do for their specific product without us having to be a police force for them. So as we were setting the foundation, we realized that for our products, there are 6 universal experiences. And in these 6 universal experiences, if we could get people to just simply be conscious of the fact that every single one of our products has these, and we're actually going to add a 7th, which is sunsetting. So you actually have to be mindful about when you take this away from somebody, what's the experience that you design for that. And you start applying the loop to these very specific experiences within the life cycle of a product. People are being much more mindful about what they're choosing to spend their time on. And so we have everything that you would expect in here, except that it's sort of a magnitude higher, where we're not telling people to place a pixel here to do it just so. We're trying to show people, like in this case, as a part of the visual design, that we've baked accessibility into this. We want people to be thinking about making accessible solutions right from the very get-go, and not beat people over the head over it and make them go to a separate site, but just have it be a consideration like any other, like choosing a color. We also have all the resources at a, sort of at a push-button capability, where we have like type scale calculators and icons and color palettes and all of that stuff. We've also designed our own animation style, and a lot of this came from us going to one of the old machine museums and watching the old IBM machines move, filming them, and then starting to pick up what actually made a machine move the way that you expect a machine to move, but also to give it a little humanity, to give it a little bit of organicness. So I'm not going to let this thing play all the way through, but if you want, check it out on our website. It's all publicly available, and you can see all of that. And we also provided all of this publicly, because what we also realized from a culture perspective is, if you launch this publicly, you make people want it from the outside, and they push it in rather than trying to force it from the bottom up inside. So that's actually really helped out a lot. I don't know if it's going to let me. So what's happened here, I'm going to back this up for a sec. Because the design language is meant for everybody, we're finding that teams are now creating their own design guides, where it is the living decisions that they're making in real time as they're choosing various elements out of the design language, so that new team members can understand where they've come from without, if you are a designer, or if you work with designers, you'll recognize this bit of the story where, like, if you have a new designer on the team, the first thing that the new designer wants to do is redesign everything, because if they didn't design it, it's crap, but if they design it, then it's okay. So like for our analytics platform team, they have everything set up for the way that they do it in all of their products, so that there is consistency just within the analytics team's work. So it could be their content guide, or how you do search, or the basics around design and development, or the experience, or the brand, and it results in things that start to look like this, which if you've ever seen old school IBM software, it didn't look like this. And this doesn't look like Google, and it doesn't look like Microsoft, and it doesn't look like SAP. It looks like us. And we're starting to see this pop up. So that was an analytics product. This is a security product. They don't look exactly the same, but they are starting to share the same qualities, so that when they go up on the wall, we can see that these things look and feel like IBM products. This is more of a sneak preview. We've released this internally, but it's the third sister to the other two. IBM Design Research is something that we found to be really important. Researchers themselves would hold on to the white lab coat mentality if we weren't going to push them towards doing a little bit more guerrilla research and contemporaneous research, but also retaining what made design research great from the HCI perspective. But what we're finding is, without redefining what this practice is in a continuous development world, there's too much time that gets taken by people doing the research, and then it's codified in a way that the rest of the team goes, not interested in reading this, and then they tuck it underneath their desk and don't do anything with it, which is a colossal waste. So it's bold. It's making statements like, we're not our users. And the other thing that we're really kind of looking forward to seeing how people react to is that We didn't give people an out. Everybody has a role. So it doesn't matter if your primary job role is a design researcher. Either you're an explorer or you're a guide. If you're an explorer, you have something to offer. Your domain expertise can be applied to the research gathering process or the research synthesis process. And if you're a guide, it's your responsibility to bring the rest of the team forward. And this is meant to be an empathy document as well, so that people say, oh, like what we've seen internally is that people read through this and they go, oh, I had no idea that's what you researchers did. So part of it is just helping people understand what it is that designers do within the company. So it may not look exactly like this, but it's going to be very close to this. It'll be out in 2 weeks publicly. You'll be able to see it with the other two as well. All of this is for naught if it's not geared towards driving to an outcome. Design without an outcome at the end is wasting everybody's time. And this is something that we've tried to make sure that we are very loud about with everybody else in the company, is that we are not designing for design's sake. We are designing to see an outcome. Hopefully it starts by just shipping a well-designed product. As soon as we can start tracking and tracing the actual impact that design has on the sales of a product or the efficacy of a service engagement, we'll be the first people to let you guys know about it, because as far as we're understanding, and you could talk to Pierre afterwards, measuring how design is received is one of the most difficult things that everybody's trying to do, but it's not necessarily the easiest thing. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. I hope I didn't take too much time. Thanks.